Hello, I'm Rebecca Rosewood, and I'm here to help you keep your curses hexy and your hexes sexy in this snarky true crime and paranormal podcast. If you like a little personality with your true crime and a little scare with some flair, I've got you covered. Thrice Cursed is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also find my curse content on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrice Cursed Pod. And you can find even more at ThriceCursedPod.com. Until then, keep it hexy.
This episode is brought to you by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Learn more at slashandcast.net.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige, and I have a very special guest joining me today for a really interesting episode in collaboration with the app CrimeDoor. If you want to join us in examining the Spreckles Mansion crime scene where Rebecca Zahau was found, you can download the app CrimeDoor and unlock Rebecca's door. That way we can all walk through and investigate together. I will remind you from time to time as we get closer to entering the crime scene to download CrimeDoor before we get there. Also, I want to mention really quick that if you are using an Android, the only issue is a lot of Android phones do not have the AR cameras, and that is something that the iPhones obviously do have. So a lot of Android users can't use the app right now, but we hope that in the future that they will incorporate AR cameras. So without further ado, I would like to give a warm welcome to the intelligent, beautiful, talented Charlie from Crimelines. Thank you so much for joining me today, Charlie. I'm sure all of my listeners are obsessed with your podcast, but for the 2 or 3 who may not know about Crimelines, tell them about your show.
Well, first, thank you for inviting me on to cover this case. I know we're both very familiar with it. Crimelines is a true crime podcast. It is one that is in the general true crime niche. I don't have a specific focus, except that I bring in history and cultural context so we can understand a little bit more about why certain things were done the way they were done, what the controversies were, that sort of thing. I mean, not a lot of hot button topics, a few, but I do want to give the most context possible, so that's what I do on Crimelines.
Absolutely, and you do a fantastic job. I absolutely love your show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we definitely both want to thank Paul Holes and the kind people at CrimeDoor for putting together this abundance of information together for us. Rebecca Zahau was a Burmese immigrant and an ophthalmic technician living in Arizona. In 2008, she began dating Jonah Shacknai, the CEO of Medicis Pharmaceutical, and he's a multimillionaire. Shacknai had 3 children, 2 from his first marriage and a son, Max, from his marriage to Dina Romano. Max was born in 2005. Jonah Shacknai divorced Dina in 2008, and Rebecca was increasingly involved with Jonah and his 3 children, especially Max. In December of 2010, Jonah Shacknai encouraged Rebecca to quit her job in order to spend more time with the family. In 2011, he invited her to spend the summer with him at his estate in Coronado Island, off the coast of San Diego. Jonah owned the famed Spreckles Mansion, which is located on the island.
Rebecca accepted Jonah's offer, and she was spending the summer of 2011 with him in Coronado. On July 11th, 2011, Rebecca was at the estate with her teenage sister Zena and Jonah's then 6-year-old son Max. At around 10:30 in the morning, Max was riding his scooter, and he fell over the banister on the 2nd floor, landing down on the 1st floor, and he was seriously injured. suffering spinal cord damage that cut off oxygen to his heart and brain. At the time of the accident, Rebecca was in the bathroom and her sister was in another room upstairs. She found Max moments later and immediately called 911. When the EMTs got to the scene, Max was not breathing and he was unresponsive. He was rushed to Rady Children's Hospital, where his parents were informed that his prognosis was grim. The incident was officially declared an accident by investigators on July 26, 2011.
On July the 12th, 2011, the day after the accident, Rebecca dropped her sister off at the airport to return home to Minnesota. She also picked up Jonah's brother, Adam Shacknai, who had just flown in from Memphis. Rebecca and Adam then drove to the hospital where they were met by Howard Luber, a friend of Jonah's. After a few hours, the three of them drove Howard back to the airport. That evening, Rebecca had dinner with Jonah and Adam at the Fish Market restaurant, after which Rebecca and Adam returned to the mansion, with Rebecca staying in the main house and Adam was staying in the guest house. Now, Adam alleges that he drank a Diet 7-Up, called his girlfriend, took an Ambien, and went to bed. Jonah went back to the hospital to sit by Max's bedside, joining Dina, and the both of them were informed that Max's condition was worsening and to adjust their expectations. Starting in the first hours of July 13th, the following took place. At 12:30 in the morning, Jonah called Rebecca and left a voice message. He was telling her about Max's worsening condition and possible imminent death. At 12:50 that morning, Rebecca did receive the voicemail and deleted it, but it's unknown whether or not she actually listened to it. At 1 in the morning, Jonah left the hospital and went to a nearby Ronald McDonald house for the night, and Dina stayed by Max's bedside.
So early in the morning, sometime between 6:15 and 6:30, according to his own testimony, Jonah's brother, Adam Shacknai, woke up and masturbated to pornography on his iPhone.
Charlie, does it seem at all weird to you that Adam came out and just told the police that he was specifically getting off to Asian bondage porn? Because from what I've read, at least, allegedly, that's the kind of porn that he said it was. Do you think he was watching it for the purposes of not only sexual gratification, but knowing what he was going to do? Or do you think it was a confession because he knew his phone might be searched and it would look suspicious, so he just wanted to kind of get it out there?
I do think it's a really odd thing to say, something to bring up. Of all the things you leave off your timeline, that would be it. But with that said, I don't know Adam's baseline. Is he an oversharer all the time? Is he that guy that just says everything that pops into his head without really running it through a filter first? Or is he a reserved person who would have only said this if it meant something? This is one of the dangers of speculation that I've talked about on my podcast before. It's that we don't actually know these people. We don't know anything about their personalities. And then we try to put meaning behind what they do or say based on what we would do or say, or what we think someone would do or say. Not everyone thinks or reacts the way we do. So I am a little uncomfortable putting too much meaning behind this without actually knowing more about Adam.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We all react differently, and especially if we're nervous or under some kind of stress and feel all this pressure on us, we never know really how we're going to react. So I definitely agree. We just speculate off of these people that, we don't even know. So I do agree with that.
And before we go any farther on our timeline, we are going to be discussing the details of what was initially perceived as a suicide. In order to discuss the questions around this, we have to discuss more details than we normally would in cases like this, in cases of suicide. We know that suicide contagion is real, which is why we don't usually go into these details. And we want to give you, the listener, the chance to just turn this episode off now if you need to. Please go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org if you need help or more information.
Thanks so much for mentioning that, Charlie. 100%. If you need to stop the episode, we completely understand that. And if you or someone you know needs help, please visit that website. It's extremely important.
So let's get back to our timeline. Around 6:30 in the morning, in that range, Adam said he got up and showered, and then he approached the main house to see if Rebecca wanted to go get breakfast before they headed to the hospital. At this point, Adam alleges that he found Rebecca hanging nude from the balcony from a rope around her neck. Her ankles were bound together. Her wrists were bound behind her back. She was gagged with a long blue sleeve shirt that had also been wrapped around her head, and the arms were double knotted and stuffed inside her mouth. Otherwise, the only items on her person were a black bionic band and a yellow Live Strong band on her left wrist, and a power balance band on her right wrist.
Yeah, I don't understand how they thought this was a suicide, because just being gagged with a long sleeve shirt, I don't understand why someone would do that to themselves. And there's just all these intricate details that don't add up to someone who's supposedly just ready to end their life, but they're taking the time to do all these things. It just, to me, it doesn't add up.
I definitely agree with that. I think so much focus is on if she could have done all of this herself and not so much on but why would she? Even if she could technically have bound her own hands, stepped through the bindings, got them behind her, all of the steps it takes to prove she can do it, we're not focusing enough on why would she?
Exactly.
That part doesn't make sense.
I agree. Totally agree.
So when Adam saw Rebecca, he first thought it was a prank. I think if we're going on the it's never a mannequin thing that comes up in true crime, that people's brains don't catch up to them when they see it. So according to Adam, he initially thought it was a prank, and then he realized it was Rebecca. So he ran into the kitchen and he grabbed a knife so that he could cut her down. He said he had to move a broken patio table beneath Rebecca, which he then stood on to cut her down. The exact time that he discovered the body and cut it down is not certain, but it was by about 6:45. Because we know at 6:48 he called 911. He was instructed by the dispatcher to begin CPR, and he claims he removed the blue shirt from Rebecca's mouth because it was blocking access. But then you look at the police reports, and they state that Adam hadn't yet started CPR when first responders arrived. Around the same time this is happening, Jonah claims that Adam sent him a text message telling him that Rebecca had hung herself.
So I want to play that 911 call for the listeners before we continue on. Also, don't forget to download the CrimeDoor app and get ready to walk through the crime scene with us, and we can analyze it together. Okay, here's the 911 call.
emergency. What are you reporting?
Yeah, I got a girl hung herself in the guest house of, it's on Ocean Boulevard across from the hotel, same place that you came and got the kid yesterday.
Okay, sir, what is the address?
I'm not sure. The back house is 1928 something. I'm not sure. Let me call you back.
Okay, sir, is she still alive?
I don't know.
Okay. Are you there?
Are you alive? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Did you get the address?
No, sir, I need the address.
Here's CPO right now. She came here yesterday to pick up a little boy.
Okay, sir, I wasn't working yesterday. I don't know what you're talking
Check
about.
your records.
Sir, I checked all of the records yesterday. I can't find anything on Ocean Boulevard. Can you tell me what the address is?
I'm looking. Just start sending them toward the hotel.
Okay, I understand that. I just need the exact address. I can't help you until I have the address.
1043 Ocean Boulevard.
1043 Ocean? Okay,
Yeah.
Is she still alive?
I don't think so.
Okay, let me get the fire department. Sir, hang on. Let me get the fire department on the phone to help you, okay? Hang on just a minute.
Come on.
Fire medical emergency? Coronado with a transfer. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Hi, what's
Got a lady that's hung herself.
What's the address?
1043 Ocean Boulevard.
1043 Ocean Boulevard?
Yeah.
Okay, what's wrong?
She hung herself, man. I woke up.
Okay, is this a house?
It's a house, yeah.
Okay, how old is she?
I'd say about 30.
30? Okay. When was the last time you saw her?
Last night.
Okay, is she beyond help?
Well, give me some. I'm compressing her chest right now.
Okay, hold on. So what's your name?
Adam Shackner.
Okay, I have help on the way. What's your cell phone number? Is it 901-485?
901-485.
Okay, listen to me. Help is coming right now, okay? And Peter, you're on the way?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and you're right there with her. Did you cut her down?
Yes, I did.
Okay, just stay with me.
EMS and the Coronado Police Department arrived on the scene soon after Adam called 911. They found Rebecca lying on the grass in the west side of the rear courtyard, which was located on the east side of the main residence. She was naked with her hands and feet bound by rope. Her hands were behind her back. The blue shirt and red rope were tied around her neck, and officers could see the other end of the same rope hanging from a second-story balcony that overlooked the courtyard. She was lying face up with her legs bent to the left, and her right leg was over her left leg. Her head was facing towards the east, and her feet were facing towards the west. Her eyes were closed, but her mouth was open. The bottoms of her feet were covered with dirt, and there were spots of what appeared to be black paint on her left breast, her right nipple, and the rope near her chin. There was also a small amount of menstrual blood on the inner part of her upper left thigh. There was an abrasion on her left hip and 2 abrasions on the upper part of her right side. A wooden table with 1 missing leg had been pulled up beside her. The missing leg was on the walkway just north of her body. There was also a knife on the walkway just west of the table, a broken piece of cactus on the walkway just east of the table, and a candle in the grassy area just south of the table. Officers could not locate a pulse and started resuscitation efforts, which were soon taken over by Coronado Fire Department personnel. Paramedics noticed that Rebecca was cold to the touch, and rigor mortis was present in her jaw area, indicating a time of death some hours earlier. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The mansion was then secured as a crime scene, and an investigation was carried out, including evidence gathering and testing and extensive photo and video documentation.
Investigators examined the upstairs guest room, where the other end of that red rope around Rebecca's neck had been spotted. In the hallway just outside of the bedroom door, there was a green and white towel with a red spot that appeared to be blood and later determined to be Rebecca's blood. Inside the bedroom, there was a full-sized bed, a desk, and a chair that had been knocked over on its left side, and it appears it had originally been in front of the desk. There was shelving on the northwest wall and a bookshelf on the southwest wall. On the floor inside the bedroom, there were 2 paintbrushes, one with black paint on the bristles, as well as 2 knives. One had a 4.5-inch blade and the other had an 8-inch blade. There was also a length of red rope, a Samsung cell phone, and a tube of black paint under a white plastic bag. The red rope visible from the courtyard was tied to the left foot post of that bed in a slip loop. It was attached to the bed in a way that both ends of the rope were required to secure it, and the bed frame had been pulled from the wall. There were clothes on top of the bed, and the sheets were pulled back, which may indicate that Rebecca was in the bed before the events occurred, but it may also indicate that she was planning on having her clothes ready to go out for the next day.
Okay, make sure that you have the CrimeDoor app downloaded, and after the commercial, we will come back and virtually walk through the crime scene together. So I think our first instinct when we look at a crime scene, for a lot of us, we are guilty of wanting to go straight to the body. But the AR door I want us to go through first is the one that you should see first that's on top with the writing on the door. Let's explore this room from left to right, center, up, and down.
I think it's really interesting the way you can visualize the crime scene more. Even how we mentioned there was this towel on the floor in the hallway, and here it is right here on my phone as I'm kind of moving through this AR experience.
As soon as you open the door, that's the first thing you see is the towel, and you can tilt your phone up and down, and you can literally see, like, right on top of the blanket, you can see the blood spots on the floor. It makes it even more real than you could even imagine. So when we go straight forward and we pan to the right, you can hold your phone tilted up and you can see the note on the door where it says, "She saved him, can you save her?"
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about this is a question I've had with this case is, if there was some type of struggle, why is only one thing knocked over? But when you look around this room, now that I'm seeing it visually, there's not a lot to knock over. This room is a guest room. There's not a ton of stuff around, and it's not somewhere where you would see a lot of signs of a struggle. So as you go in, you can see that chair that looks like it was at the desk knocked over. You can see the bed and how close it is to the balcony or not. Being able to visualize the scene really helped. Another interesting thing is you can see where the writing on the door is and how high up it is, which I think will become relevant as we discuss some more things around this.
Oh, definitely. And we can see the two knives on the floor. You can see the rope that is tied in the slip knot to the leg of the bed. And there's paintbrushes on the floor. When you go to the right, you can see, of course, the chair that's been knocked over. And you can see where the rope is hanging over the balcony. You can also go to the balcony and see where the footprints are. Now, if you want to, you can also kind of move back and look at the room from all angles. You can see the phone on the floor behind the door. Now that we've looked around the guest room and some of the balcony, let's talk a bit about this surrounding area. We can also make sure that we didn't miss anything.
So the double doors from the guest room that lead out to the balcony were closed but not locked. But the door to the right was latched, and the balcony floor was very dirty. There were two partial bare footprints matching Rebecca's feet just outside of the door frame, with the heels together and the toes pointed out in a V shape, as well as the corresponding toe prints. So we're talking full prints. In addition, there was a single shoe impression that appeared to be a boot print, which was a few inches in front and to the left of the foot impressions. And this is something that we did see in our walk through the CrimeDoor. The balcony railing had a thin layer of dirt on top, with the exception of two areas. There's an area 11 inches in length without any dirt, and then a half-inch area around 4 inches to the right without any dirt. The half-inch area is where that red rope was found resting on top of the railing, which makes sense. The 11-inch void was in line with the foot and toe impressions on the balcony. There was paperwork on the desk and a box on the floor that was related to Rebecca's, quote, personal matters. And a book called Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft was also found in the room, which had hand-drawn photos of subjects that were being bound in different positions. There was also a message written in black paint on the side of the bedroom door that faced the hallway, and it read, "She saved him, can you save her?"
Yeah, I also just went back and looked at the two desks beside the bed, and the desk, if you're looking at the bed, it's going to be to your left, and the book on the bookshelf looks like the one that would be the witchcraft book. I didn't see that before, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one thing that I like about this app, is that it is including the whole of the crime scene. And I know that they had a lot of access and worked with the family on this, which I always like.
Yeah, that really does make it even more realistic, because you've got the family's accounts, you've got all the pictures. So I can't wait to talk to Neil and Lauren about how they actually make this because it is incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you what you make of the message on the door, and I'd like to get your opinion, and then I'll tell you mine and see if we agree or if we have differences of opinions. So who do you think wrote it, and what do you feel it means to you?
I am going to say that I think the meaning, I'm going to kind of answer your question backwards. I think the meaning depends on who wrote it. If Rebecca wrote it, it would be a message to her boyfriend, a dramatic moment referring back to her calling 911 and trying to save Max. Because at this point, she knows Max is not doing well, but the only voicemail she got was he's not doing well, not that he had already died. But the message would be, are you going to save me? I saved him. A dramatic moment of someone who feels so hopeless she's about to end her life. But if someone else was responsible for what happened to her, I think it means nothing. I think it was a cover-up to make it look like she was in a dramatic and dark place. So if the only other person at the house that night, Adam, was responsible for this, I think that note is just a cover-up.
I agree with that. It's just so bizarre. I think Adam probably wrote it as in, like you said, trying to make it look dramatic and just a cover-up, as in Rebecca saved Max, now can you save Rebecca? And trying to make it look like she was in that really dark place, which I'm sure she was in a dark place, but I don't think taking her life was something that she was thinking about. And plus, we have the fact that Rebecca's height was around 5'2", and the door is around 6 feet tall. The place that it's written, I don't see Rebecca being able to reach up there unless she had a stool or something, which I don't think has been mentioned at all anywhere. So I tend to lean towards Adam making this cryptic message to make people wonder, possibly, and his handwriting analysis matched the M on the door and the A. He also wrote left-leaning, and Rebecca wrote right-leaning. So, unless I'm mistaken and I have that backwards, but whichever way his actual handwriting leans is the same way the writing on the door was leaning. I think on the video that I watched of Paul Holes kind of telling us about this, he also said Adam wrote in blocked letters, which is what we're seeing here. So it really all points to Adam to me.
I think writing is very difficult. Handwriting analysis with block letters is less accurate than cursive or even regular printing. It's also less accurate when you're taking what someone writes when they're writing on a table and then try to apply that to a paintbrush in front of them. I think for me, the most compelling part is where on the door it is, because I'm the same height as Rebecca. It is human nature that when you go to write in front of yourself, especially if you're not writing anything really long where you need all the space, you go for eye level. That is not eye level for Rebecca and me. It is not. It is way too high up. It is on the top third of the door. Reaching up like that to paint 2 sentences is just, you couldn't match her handwriting to it anyway because the positioning is so wrong. But it is absolutely not the way most people would do it. We put things at eye level. And that is telling me that I think the person who wrote this, their eye level is towards the top of a door. Someone who is 5'2", their eye level is not that high.
Exactly. I agree. I'm 5'2" as well. And if I were to stand up and write something on the wall or the door, it would definitely be at eye level. I wouldn't try to reach up or, go above that. It's just total instinct also, to write at eye level. So I agree with that for sure. Now, some further details are the red rope likely came from the garage, where there was a void on a middle shelf where the boating supplies were kept. There was also a chandelier on the ground in the entryway for Max's fall. According to an interview with Rebecca's sister, Snowham Horwath, Rebecca had been under extreme stress trying to navigate contention in the family between herself and Jonah, and Jonah's 2 older children as well as his ex-wife Dina. There had also apparently been an altercation not too long before Dina and Rebecca at Max's school, during which Dina lunged at Rebecca. Rebecca's last outgoing call was to her voicemail on July 13th at 12:50 in the morning. Her last outgoing text was to Zena on July 12th at 8:39 p.m. The following items were seized from the house related to the search: gloves from a table in the first floor living room, a towel with red stains from the first floor entryway, a box with paint items from the first floor butler's pantry, several items from the second floor master bedroom, which included a Dr. Pepper bottle at the entry to the bedroom, a red stain in the shower, hair on the shower wall, multiple camera video equipment, clothing folded on the bed. There was also a letter to establish dominion and control from a kid's room on the second floor, a marriage certificate for Rebecca from the second floor closet, tissues with red stains in the second floor bathroom, and clothing on the floor as well as a beverage can. There was also a boarding pass and long hair in the shower from the guest house.
So we're going to check out the second crime door related to this case, and that is the courtyard. And I do want to give a user discretion here before you do open it. This is all rendered. These are not actual photographs, but when you do walk through through this crime door, the first thing you do see is a rendering of Rebecca's body hanging from the balcony. And for some people, it will be upsetting no matter what. For some people, just knowing that it's there, you can get your head ready for it. But we did just want to give that quick warning before we walk through this one. If you would rather not see this, you can just listen to us talk about it.
Absolutely. As Charlie said, when you first open it, we see Rebecca hanging, and, you can walk right up to her. You can tilt your phone forward to kind of see as much as you can handle to see. They actually show the menstrual blood that was on her. You can see the black paint, and you can tell that her hands are bound. So you can see all of the rope. And you can also see what they mentioned earlier about the broken cactuses and the table. There's a lot going on that I think will make more sense when we tell you a little bit more about the autopsy and what was found. Because just looking at this, it may look like a very intricate suicide, but when we get deeper into it, I think a lot of people will agree that this is definitely not the case.
And I do want to just say one more time that this was created in conjunction with the family, helping and approving things. So had I seen this without knowing that, I would believe this was disrespectful. But when the family comes in and is okay with this and approves it, then I feel so much more comfortable with this. So I really give props to the CrimeDoor people for doing it this way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's very important to them that these families, that they work with them and that they shine a light on what actually happened, so we can get a better understanding. We can look at it a lot closer, and for us, it just makes it more, not like it wasn't real before, but it brings a whole other level of emotion the way you connect with cases. It just makes it so much more real and not just a story that we tell and try to imagine. It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And something that I really think this helps people with is a lot of times something will be ruled a suicide. The family thinks it is possibly a homicide, and people will too quickly write them off as just grieving family members who don't want to accept the truth. By putting out all the information here as they have, they are giving Rebecca's family a voice to a wider audience to say, no, look, we have actual concerns here. So let's go ahead and get into that first official autopsy, which happened on July 14th, 2011, and it was conducted by San Diego Deputy Medical Examiner Jonathan R. Lucas, with police witnesses present. Some of the findings reflected in the autopsy include that the cause of death was hanging by a long drop of 9 feet from the second floor balcony. This caused a corresponding ligature mark around her neck, petechial hemorrhaging in, around, and between her eyes, as well as on the inside of her lips. There were fractures in the left arm, hyoid bone and cartilage, and hemorrhaging of muscles on her left side.
Yeah, and I want to interject here because Jules from Riddle Me That, True Crime, and I did a collaboration that will be coming out on her show, and the Zahau family lawyer pointed out something about this 9 feet drop that I really didn't think about before. So if you were to jump with a noose around your neck 9 feet, it would damn near pull your head off, and Rebecca didn't have as many gory injuries that one would have if they jumped from 9 feet. So it kind of looks like she may have been lowered from the balcony by someone. Another thing that really bothers me that, I think a lot of females or even males with long hair will understand is that we instinctually pull our hair if something is constricting it. So the fact that the noose is like around her hair really bothers me because I don't think that a female would do that just because we have the automatic instinct of grabbing our hair and like fixing it to where it's not around our neck because it's so uncomfortable. So that's another thing that really bothers me.
Yeah, I definitely think that the drop hanging is actually, although it's more dramatic in TV shows, it's not very common. That's not how most people hang themselves. And when I did an episode on this case for my old podcast, Insight, I found, this is so graphic and gory and macabre, but I found a sheet, a height to weight to drop length for executions for the British colonies. And it was to make sure that you didn't do anything that would also desecrate the body. And a 9-foot drop would have done damage to Rebecca's body that I don't see mentioned here.
Absolutely.
The autopsy also found an atypical ligature furrow around her neck from the rope, which was more pronounced on her left side than her right side. And she had scattered abrasions, contusions on her back, arms, and legs, which may have been consistent with impact with large plants that were under the balcony. Again, in that CrimeDoor, we did see damage to the plants. The toxicology screen showed no alcohol, medications, or illicit drugs in her system, and there was no indication of sexual assault or vaginal trauma on Rebecca's body. There was blood present in her vagina and around her cervix, but she was menstruating at the time, so it is assumed to be from that. So with these autopsy results, they found that Rebecca's right hand could have, according to the report, been removed fairly easily from her wrist bindings by simply slipping it from the rope. So we're not talking super tight, can't move her hands bindings. There was a reenactment done that showed that Rebecca's wrist bindings could have been tied in front of her with one of her hands free, then placed in the back with the binding with her hand then slipping in.
So Paul Holes has an excellent video on CrimeDoor, and he talks about the way these bindings were tied. He numbered the rope similar to connect the dots on how they were specifically tied and how people tried to do it, and it was really impossible to replicate it by yourself. They were nautical knots, and it definitely points to Adam, who worked on a tugboat. Paul's video was so interesting, it was so detailed, and it even just made it more clear, in my opinion, that there's no way she could have done that to herself.
And like we said before, even if she could, why would she? Why do all of this?
Exactly.
So the cause of death was declared to be a suicide. The medical examiner wrote that the circumstances of the death are unusual and initially considered suspicious. However, unusual circumstances do not automatically make a death a homicide, which is true, and homicides and suicides can often have similar features. Most people that commit suicide do not leave suicide notes, also true, and many people do not have a history of documented depression. Suicidal hangings in which bindings are used are rare, but well described, and it was demonstrated in this case that the decedent could have set up the bindings by herself. Despite no history of depression, the decedent was found the morning after she had apparently learned that her boyfriend's son, who was under her care when his fall had occurred 2 days prior, would likely not survive. So what the ME is saying here is just because it doesn't look right doesn't mean it couldn't be this way, which I do agree with, but I think there are other signs that point towards homicide. I don't believe, as the ME does, that there was just not evidence of a homicide, because the ME even acknowledged Rebecca had 4 scalp wounds, but somehow connected that to the hanging.
No, I just absolutely feel like, okay, if she had scalp wounds, I feel like that's somebody that probably hit her over the head, maybe knocked her unconscious, and maybe that's why there wasn't much of a struggle. And also with the paint on her breasts, it's like maybe possibly Adam had the paint on his hands and he was doing something to her breasts. There's so much more evidence. You know, even though what the ME is saying is, you know, it's true. Just because it looks unusual doesn't mean it's impossible. We know all things are definitely possible, but like you said, there are so many more signs that point towards homicide. So, as proof of suicide, the medical examiner brought the following points. A. Distance. The distance from the balcony railing to the knot on the neck ligature, which was the minimum distance of the drop, was 110 inches, which is 9 foot 2 inches, with tension applied. This would have placed Rebecca's feet 26.5 inches, which is just over 2 feet, above the ground. B. Injuries. Her neck injuries, both in how many there were and where they were consistent with a drop from the height mentioned above. C. Footprints and lack of struggle. The 2 relatively preserved bare footprints on the balcony and the lack of signs of a struggle indicate suicide. D. Binding evidence. There was allegedly no evidence that Rebecca had been bound against her will, as there was no sign of struggle at the scene, and no toxicological evidence that she was sedated. But, as I said, like those scalp wounds could have meant that somebody had knocked her in the head a few times. You know, I just don't know. That's just how I feel. E. Police didn't find anything. The ME says that, quote, a complete and thorough investigation by the San Diego Sheriff's Office was done, and they allegedly found no evidence to support homicide.
But we do have a second autopsy to look at here, and this was performed later in 2011 by Dr. Cyril Wecht. And among the findings were the 4 blunt force scalp wounds to Rebecca's head. So these 4 injuries, Dr. Wecht said should not be minimized, as they appeared to have been allegedly in the first autopsy. And he said they would have been caused by a smooth, small, blunt, round object impacting her head in a blunt force fashion. He also found that there were no traces of several injuries that you would expect to see from a long fall drop, which, Paige has already referenced. There were no fractures of the cervical vertebrae, no epidural or subdural hemorrhaging of the spinal cord, no spinal cord softening, and other assorted injuries he would have expected to find. Now, another interesting thing that I think true crime podcast listeners hear about in cases is lividity. And that is really where the blood is settling. And in the back and lower extremities is where the lividity was in this case, which is a potential inconsistency with a long drop suicide. Lividity suggests that Rebecca was bound in a way that it was very unlikely for her to have done it herself, which is in direct contrast to what the official authorities' position is on this. So these findings, along with the circumstances of her death, led the second autopsy to conclude that there was obviously reason to doubt the suicide verdict. The hypothesis on the alternative, that it is possibly a homicide, it started with an altercation inside the bedroom. It involved 4 blunt force impacts to the head that rendered Rebecca unconscious. Then at that point, her upper and lower extremities were bound by rope, which could have also been used as the ligature around her neck. And then the blue shirt was then used as a gag. She could have been lowered or even thrown over the 16-foot balcony to make it look like it was a suicide.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with Dr. Wecht. The injuries just don't add up to suicide at all, in my opinion. And how else could she have gotten those blunt force hits to the head unless it was done by someone else? I really don't understand that part. I don't want to give too much away, but when you hear the analysis by Keith Greer, the Zahau family lawyer, on Riddle Me That, he brings up evidence and ways that certain things were used that I did not even know about, and it blew my mind. So I am definitely 100% on the side of Dr. Wecht and Keith Greer. So here are the sheriff's conclusions. Upon investigation, the sheriff's office concluded that there was no foul play in Rebecca's death, which was a suicide. Their evidence that was given included only Rebecca's DNA was found on the knife and rope from the guest room, as well as the rope from her feet and her neck. Her DNA was also found on the rope from her wrists and the blue shirt. Rebecca's prints matched every identifiable print found in the house, except prints taken from the door to the balcony and the bed frame. The black paint in the tube was the same as the paint on her body, the paintbrush, and the bedroom door. Now, I keep going back to this, I know, but what would be the reason that anyone would put a gag in their mouth, put paint on her own body, tie all of these complicated nautical knots? I mean, the scene was obviously cleaned very well, which, if it was just Rebecca who was supposedly ready to complete suicide, I don't believe that she would be cleaning everything down, or almost everything. And there are a few pieces of evidence that suggest the scene wasn't wiped down well enough, according to Keith Greer, and the evidence that he saw. The fact that she was nude and on her period, this is something no woman, especially Rebecca, who was always worried about making her mom happy. She wanted her mom to be proud of her. Rebecca was super modest, and she cared a lot about what her family thought about her. So these things are not what I feel she would have wanted her family to see or would want anyone to see. You know, I don't just nude and knowing you're on your period. I mean, I just feel it was completely theatrical, and it was possibly to humiliate her.
I think another possibility of why she was nude is that towel that was dropped in the hallway. She may have just gotten out of the shower, or she was getting changed or dressed when whatever happened.
Absolutely. I feel like a possible attack, like the phone was dropped. If you think about it, if someone was in the mind frame of, okay, I'm going to do this, why would you drop the towel and your phone? I feel like a phone would be placed on a table or a bed or placed somewhere and not dropped on the floor as the towel was, like it was a surprise, as if she were surprised.
I also find it alarming that they found only Rebecca's prints when we know a lot of people had been in that house recently, because we have Jonah and his son. His 2 older children had been there relatively recently. Her sister had been there. Adam was there. So we have multiple people in this house, but in that one room, only Rebecca's prints were found. That doesn't sound entirely right to me. Sometimes what you don't find that you should be finding is also a clue. So I do think it is true that things were possibly wiped down.
The foot impressions on the balcony were the same size as Rebecca's feet. The knots binding Rebecca were not specialized and would ostensibly allow her to slip her hands and feet in and out of the bindings without assistance. The rope was cut into sections, which Rebecca was allegedly able to calculate perfectly. These included 1 length of red nylon rope cut to 9 feet 2 inches. This was tied to the railing at a distance allowing for 26.5 inches of space between Zahau's feet on the balcony and the ground below. It also included 2 other lengths of rope. One was used to tie her hands behind her back inside a figure-8 loop with a vertical back knot. The other was used to bind her ankles. Rebecca fashioned a gag from the blue shirt on her own, wrapping it around her own neck 3 times with a portion of it stuffed so deeply into her mouth and throat that mucus fluids were deposited onto it from her gagging.
So this is what the sheriff feels is reasonable in ruling. The ME, the sheriff, everybody together in the authority positions, believes all of this is reasonable to say, well, she could have done it, therefore she must have done it. And I just am not there. I'm not there.
Same. I can't. I can't believe it. I can't see anyone doing this to themselves at all. I'm with you 100%.
So the CrimeDoor experts have looked at this case, and they have come up with an alternative theory to this case that they call the most probable scenario, according to them. And I'm going to walk you through it. It is a little bit graphic, but not too bad compared to what we've already been discussing anyway. But, you know, I do like to give warnings to people. So this scenario is that Rebecca gets out of the shower. She is wrapped in the towel. She is on her period, and that leaves the 3 drops of blood on the carpet next to her towel. They're just gravity droplets. She is surprised by Adam when she enters the room or she goes towards the room. He may have had sexual motivation towards Rebecca and may have attempted to assault her as she got out of the shower. This is, according to the CrimeDoor expert, supported by the impression of a blood stain. So we have those 3 gravity droplets, and then there is an impression blood stain, which is also next to the dropped shower towel. That stain could have been caused by Rebecca being nude and having direct contact with the carpet, like sitting on it, or with another object. A struggle would then ensue between Rebecca and Adam, and this may be supported by a statement from a neighbor 2 doors down who said she did hear a woman screaming for help from the direction of the house around 11:30 at night, the night before Rebecca was found. As there is no additional blood evidence or disturbed items between the hallway and the bedroom, it seems pretty clear to the expert that Rebecca was not actively involved in the binding of her feet, wrists, or neck. At this point, another person, who may have been Adam, either strangled Rebecca, cut off the blood to her carotid artery, and/or assaulted her to the point of unconsciousness for several minutes. This allowed time for this assailant to get the rope and the kitchen knives, to then bind her hands, measure the rope, and tie it to the bed, as well as create the noose around her neck, gag her, and carry her to the balcony. I know there has been discussion about how her footprints were found in that V position on the balcony. That could have been, I've seen in another theory, that if her feet were bound and the person was basically propping her up, that is what caused that.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
So she was carried out to the balcony, but then sort of propped up while the assailant got everything into place. The CrimeDoor expert believes that the evidence indicates that Rebecca did not free fall from the balcony while hanging from the neck, as that force produced would have just caused far more injuries to her body, including a spinal cord injury, and none of that was present. It is more likely that she was strangled with a rope ligature, which caused that fracture to her hyoid bone and the cartilage area, not typically accessible by way of a free drop vertical hanging. The assailant was the one who painted the cryptic message on the door to throw the trail off at some point before lowering Rebecca off the balcony, which is when the paint transfer would have happened. When Adam called 911 the next morning, there is some indication that he may not have been alone and that he may have called or been assisted by his brother, which is something I'm a little bit cautious to speculate. I've talked on my show about ripples of speculation. At the center, the rock that hits the water is your evidence, and you don't want to go too many ripples out of your evidence, or you're just basing your speculation on previous speculation and not on evidence. So the assistance of a brother, a family member, of anyone else, that's kind of a ripple away from the evidence that personally I'm not comfortable with, but it is what the CrimeDoor experts do believe happened, and they believe it is based on evidence more than I do, but we can all have differences of opinion on that.
Definitely. I know for me in the 911 call, there seemed to be a voice in the background. It was not too audible, but if you listen really closely, it's what it sounds like. And that's just my opinion. I don't know that, so I don't want to look too deep into it, because like you said, once we start going into other theories and such, it just takes away from the actual facts and evidence that we already have.
I'm really interested in hearing the episode with Riddle Me That, where I think we're going to get more information, which obviously you already know, but the rest of us, the listening audience, will get more information from the family's attorney, who has to take the theories and ideas and the speculation and base them in evidence if he's going to stand up and say this is what happened. So I am really interested in hearing what he has to say.
Definitely. There's one thing that I can say that I think he has brought up before, but he showed, I don't know if it's the knife or a knife exactly like it, but it is a big knife, and it had the outlines of where Rebecca's fingerprints were on this knife. And if you're holding it like the blade is towards your face, and you've got your fingers on the blade, it makes no sense. Why would you hold it that way? However, when you've got your fingers in that position on the knife and you put it behind your back, it matched perfectly, like she was trying to cut the rope off. And there are just so many things that have been deeply examined that Keith Greer talks about that are incredible. And I don't want to give too much away, so I'll let everyone, wait for that to come out. But there are some things that are going to shock a lot of people. And if you think this is still a suicide, I think what he will have to show will definitely make you think or make you change your mind.
I definitely do not believe that this was a suicide. What else it was is a matter for the courts to determine, which the family has done such a great job pushing to get this, to keep this going, to get this looked at. They didn't give up when they realized that it wasn't going to move forward. They kept pushing. They've used the media. They've used the legal system. They've taken every chance they've had to get the full story out there because they know they're right. They're not hiding from any questions or any controversy. And I really feel for them that they haven't just been able to grieve the loss of Rebecca, but they've had to be fighting this whole time. I feel so much empathy for them that their grief has been so complicated by all of this. But I also admire them that instead of getting into bed and not wanting to get out, which is what I would have done, they got up and they started work and they got to work and they have moved the needle on this case more than I've really seen most families be able to do, even though they're doing the same work. They've had a lot of success with this. And so my heart goes out to them. And I also just admire this family so much.
Gosh, I agree so much with that. I definitely sympathize and empathize as much as I possibly can. And like you said, our hearts go out to the family. It is just so tragic when you know that your family member, this person more than anyone else, and they wouldn't do something like this. And you've got people telling you, well, this is what happened, when you know not only by evidence, but in your heart what really happened and what's the truth. And that is just, I cannot imagine going through this. There are so many families around the world that do, and it just breaks my heart.
So hopefully that this family can inspire other families and we can get these cases moving. There are other cases in my mind right now that I would love to see get the same type of movement and interest by the true crime community, because a lot of what fuels this is the listeners and the viewers who are reaching out to Nancy Grace and Dr. Phil and Paul Holes and Oxygen, the people who are sending in these ideas on, you need to look into this, you need to look into this. That makes a huge difference. I don't think people realize how much their voice does make a difference when it comes to getting media attention on cases. So the listeners and the viewers who have really become passionate about this case have also done their role in moving it forward. And I think this is such a great example, especially now with it being in CrimeDoor, on how we can take what is an interest in true crime and make it an advocacy and an activism that we can change things. So I think this case is a really good example of that.
Absolutely. And that's one amazing thing about CrimeDoor, is that they spotlight cases like this that are undetermined, cold cases, all of these things. Families can reach out to CrimeDoor. If you have pictures of the crime scene and you have all of the case files and things that are needed for this, and you want a spotlight on your loved one's, tragic death, then CrimeDoor will work with any family to get exposure on them. And I wish that families would reach out and get their loved ones' stories spotlighted, and to get the wheels rolling on getting justice for them. So that would be great.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. It was great to finally talk to you. We talk online all the time, but it's nice to finally talk to you and participate in bringing more awareness to both this case and also to CrimeDoor, which I've enjoyed exploring some other cases on there and learning about cases that some I've heard of, some I haven't, and really immersing myself in the information.
Yeah, there are so many that I had never even heard of before, and I definitely want to look more into. But yeah, thank you so much, Charlie. It has been a pleasure to finally get to talk to you and work with you. I love your show, and I'm just so honored.
Thank you.
No, I'm so honored that you would come on my show and do this with me. So thank you so much.
This has been great, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So until next time, you guys, stay safe and take care.